Can you even imagine surviving one atomic bomb? And then you go home only to have it happen all over again just 3 days later? I mean, it sounds like something out of a movie, right? But this is the true story of Tsutomu Yamaguchi. So let's dive into this unbelievable journey of survival and what it ended up teaching the world about the terrifying, lingering effects of radiation. First, we're going to start with his personal story, because to really understand the science that came out of this tragedy, you have to first understand the man who lived through the fire not once, but twice. Just let that sink in for a second. That's what Tsutomu Yamaguchi actually said after the second bomb fell. It's such a chilling thought, right? It perfectly captures the absolute horror of what he went through, this personal nightmare that he felt was literally chasing him across Japan. This timeline, I mean, it's just wild how compressed this whole ordeal was. On August 6th, he's in Hiroshima for a business trip. The bomb drops. The very next day, seriously injured, he somehow makes it onto a train to go home. And then, get this, just 2 days later, on August 9th, he's in his office back in Nagasaki, and it happens again. The sequence of events is almost impossible to wrap your head around.
So let's just try to put ourselves in that moment. It's August 6th, 8:15 in the morning. Yamaguchi is a young engineer. He's just gotten off a tram. He's about 3 kilometers, so less than 2 miles, from the hypocenter when a single American bomber, the Enola Gay, drops its payload.
The blast was so powerful, it just threw him to the ground. He was blinded for a while, and his left eardrum was completely destroyed. The top half of his body was covered in horrific burns. Years later in a documentary, he broke down crying, describing what he saw: the bloated bodies in the rivers, the walking wounded, with their flesh literally melting off of them. And he described it in his words as hanging like giant gloves. Just unimaginable.
Incredibly, he survived that. He gets on a train and goes back to Nagasaki. So on August 9th, he's sitting in his office wrapped in bandages, trying to explain to his boss what he'd just seen in Hiroshima, and his boss doesn't even believe him. And right then, it happened again. That same brilliant, blinding white light filled the room. Once more, he was just 3 kilometers from ground zero.
Yamaguchi survived the second blast too, but his story and the stories of hundreds of thousands of others left this huge, terrifying question that would hang over the world for decades to come.
The immediate devastation, that was obvious. But what about the invisible wounds? What did this totally unprecedented exposure to radiation mean for the health of the survivors? And, maybe even more importantly, for the generations that would follow them?
Well, to answer that question, it took one of the longest and most extensive medical studies in all of human history. An 80-year effort to truly understand the legacy of the bombs.
This absolutely massive project is led by the Radiation Effects Research Foundation, or RERF. It was set up just a few years after the war as a joint effort between the US and Japan, and it was dedicated to one thing: tracking the health of the survivors for the rest of their lives.
And the scale here is just staggering. The main group, which they call the Lifespan Study, includes more than 120,000 people. So this isn't some small sample size. This is a massive, multi-generational study that has become the foundation for basically everything we know about how radiation affects human beings.
And this visual does a great job of showing just how comprehensive this was. They didn't just look at the direct survivors, nope, they also tracked a group of people who were exposed while they were still in the womb, which is so important for understanding developmental effects. And as you can see, they followed a huge group, 77,000 of the survivors' children, to see if any genetic effects were being passed down to the next generation.
So, after 8 decades of research, what did this monumental study actually find? What was the long-term price that the survivors' bodies had to pay?
This graph here really tells a story. It shows 2 totally different waves of disease that hit the survivors. The first wave, that's the red line on the chart, is leukemia. The risk for that shot up just a couple of years after the bombing and peaked like crazy within about 6 to 8 years. But then there's this second, much longer wave. That's the blue line, and that represents solid cancers: stomach, lung, breast cancer, you name it. That risk didn't really start to emerge for about a decade, and it just continued to be a threat for the rest of their lives.
So the bottom line is this: the REFF studies proved without a doubt that there was a major dose-dependent increase in risk for leukemia and a whole range of other cancers. They also found higher risks for some non-cancer issues too. And one of the most critical findings was that the younger you were at the time of the bombing, the more sensitive your body was to radiation's effects over your lifetime.
I mean, this data literally wrote the book on global radiation safety standards.
Okay, so now we have to bring these two stories back together. The massive population-level data from the scientists and the intensely personal, real-world experience of Tsutomu Yamaguchi and his family.
And this is where things get really complex and frankly heartbreaking. On one side, you have the science. The RARF's huge study on 77,000 children of survivors has so far found no statistically significant increase in inheritable diseases. That's the scientific conclusion on a population-wide level. But then you have a father's experience. Yamaguchi's wife was poisoned by that radioactive black rain. His son died from cancer at 59. His daughters suffered from chronic health problems their entire lives. His story is this powerful, tragic reminder that broad scientific data can't erase individual suffering.
You know, for decades, Yamaguchi lived a pretty quiet life. He was hesitant to even talk about what happened, partly because he felt like so many others had suffered more. But in his later years, he realized his story was unique, and he embraced it. He wrote a book, he was in a documentary, and he started speaking out, all because he wanted to make sure nobody else would ever have to suffer like he had.
He even addressed the United Nations in 2006. He lived to be 93 years old, a life defined by surviving the absolutely unsurvivable. And he left the world with this simple but incredibly profound question. It's a question that echoes from his incredible experience, and it challenges every single one of us to really think about the legacy of what happened in that one fateful week in August 1945.